Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I will show you the fruits of my Tour de Fleece efforts and what I'm planning to do with all of the yarn that I spun, including knitting a sweater that I never thought I would knit. So let's get started. Tour de Fleece ended on Sunday. Tour de Femmes continues through this week. So some people who do Tour de Fleece also continue through the end of this week. I finished up my spinning, I think on Tuesday. I had just a little bit left to spin and I needed to ply it and wash it and all of that. So when I set a goal, it's usually I'm just pointed in a certain direction. And then so that I have something to go toward, and I don't mind taking a side trip. I don't mind not ending up where I originally planned. I just want to have some sort of goal, because if I don't have any kind of goal, if I don't have any intention of something, I just fritter away my time. This year, my goal was to spin up some of these rare breeds that I had, like sample sizes, like I can then later on knit up and add to my breed study. That was one thing, because I've had some of these rare breeds for a while and they've just been sitting there and I wanted to deal with them. So I started spinning those before Tour de Fleece started. The first day of Tour de Fleece, I did spin up an ounce of caracal and ended up applying that the next day. So that was one of my goals, was, doing these rare breeds, and I was working on them up to and including the very beginning. And then another goal I had was to do a sweater spin with this wool roving that a viewer, Amber, had sent to me. A friend of hers raises sheep and works in a mini mill and had created some different rovings, and Amber invited me to pick out something I liked, and then she sent me 14 ounces of it. There were 7 2-ounce balls available, and she had all of it sent to me. So I wanted to spin that up, and then I had a stretch goal of these bats that I had bought in the spring. It's Targhee wool from, I think, Montana or Wyoming. To that, some yarn scraps from a local indie dyer, it's called Muse 2320, were added to it in the carding machine. So it was like cream, but it's got little flecks of color in there. So that was my stretch goal, because really I had in my head, I'd like to spin an ounce a day. It seemed like a doable thing that I could do. That would for sure get me my sweater spin done and possibly get started on this one with the Targhee. Well, at the beginning of July, I was volunteering at Galewoods Farm. It's a farm it's a working farm that's used to educate the public. It's owned by the park system, to educate the public about where their food comes from. And they have this flock of Finn sheep, and they need fiber volunteers to process the wool, and they do things with the public with a lot of wet felting things, and on events or for kids' classes or all sorts of things. The wool's used for a lot of different things, and so as a volunteer I scour and I also help dye, and then there are some of us who are spinners and wanted the opportunity to spin some of the wool that they could then sell in the farm store. They picked a very 1 or 2 fleeces from the spring shearing that they set aside for this sheep to shelf idea, where it would not leave the premises to go to any sort of mill that would process it. It would always be in the hands of the fiber volunteers. Now, we can bring it home in order to work on it, but it's not leaving the hands of the farm or the fiber volunteers. So at the beginning of July, I'm already, started on Tour de Fleece. I've got all these plans, and I'm handed this 2-pound bag, beautiful fleece, hand-picked. One of their summer high school interns had gone through and hand-picked it, so all the dirt and all the vegetable matter, the VM, was out of it. It's beautiful. I could bring it home and I could card it and create roving from it. But I was thinking, but it's Tour de Fleece, and I want to spin this other thing, but I also want to spin this. And so what I did was I kind of alternated between spinning this wine-colored roving for my sweater spin and then spinning for the farm. And I did a few other things as well. I have two spinning wheels. I have a treadle wheel, it's a Lendrum, and then I have an e-spinner. And so I thought, well, I'll do the stuff for the farm on the e-spinner, and then I'll use my treadle wheel for my sweater spin. I only have 3 bobbins for each. In order to keep spinning, I need to transfer the yarn from the bobbin that I'm spinning from onto a storage bobbin. My storage bobbins were filling up, and I was like, what happened? I thought I had 12 storage bobbins, and I had 3 bobbins that had old spins on them, was like leftovers that I didn't bother, doing anything with. So I had 3 bobbins like that, but I thought I had 4 missing bobbins. Turns out no. I looked at my receipt. I'd bought these 5 years ago or something like that from the Woolery, and I'd bought 8. So I'm like, okay. So I dealt with the singles that were on these storage bobbins. I applied that stuff up as well. So, between all of this, I've got all of these skeins of yarn. We'll go to the overhead and I'll show them to you. But one of the things I haven't done yet is everything's been, plied and washed, but I haven't done the measuring of how many yards I have since it's been washed. Because when you take it off of the bobbin, you use this thing called a nitty knotty, and you're winding it around. This has got a 2-yard circumference. So you wind it over here, around here, so you can do this whole circle, and that's how you can create a skein, something that looks like this that you can then twist up into a skein. So when you're counting, you can count as you go. When you're winding it off, you can count how many times you've gone the full circumference, and then write it down, and you just double it, because then that's, if I count 150 times I went around, then that's 300 yards, because this is 2 yards total. Well, then you wash the wool, and inevitably it's going to get smaller in some way. And that's going to depend on what kind of fleece it is and how you spun it. So long wools that don't have much crimp are going to have a lot of drape, and they're going to be essentially the same length they were. But you get something with a lot of crimp and a lot of bounce in it, and it's going to shrink up. So I know how many yards I had before I washed, but I don't know how many yards I have now. And as an example, this is some of that Gail Wood's farm when I was knitting or spinning very fine, and I'm like, they're selling this by the ounce in the store, and I would just as soon spin a little thicker if I could. But I have sort of a default way of spinning based on just how fine the fiber is. So after I finished spinning that, I thought I'm going to practice and see if I can spin a little thicker. So I made this smaller amount. So if I hold this up, you see how much it's bouncing back. So that's why this might shrink. So in a comparison, here is the caracole that I spun at the beginning. And then I have one of the little bobbins of singles that I had on my storage bobbins I wanted. This was called South Down. And then these were the leftovers from a spin I did for my daughter. And I sent her the yarn, but I was a 3-ply, and I had 2 bobbins that had a little bit left. I think it's like a ½ an ounce total. So I thought, well, I'll just ply that up. So these were all wound off on this 2-yard nitty knotty, and they were all washed. Let me hold these up so you can see. You see how different the lengths are on these? The caracole is just as long. The South Down is the next, and then I've got the one for my daughter, and then this fin is the shortest. So they shrink up. So in order to know how much yarn you actually have available to knit with, you have to remeasure them, and I haven't done that yet. So what I'll have to do is put them on a Swift, and then do it on the nitty naughty again, and then I can write down the post length. And then I'll know for sure what yardage I have, so that when I go to knit with it, if I'm using a pattern, I will know whether or not I actually have the right number of yards, because my pre-washed yardage is going to be different than the post yardage, the post-wash yardage. So I want to go to the overhead and show you everything a little more up close. So this is off of the storage bobbin. This is yarn for my daughter. I will see her probably, for the state fair. She's going to come in for the state fair, and I can hand this off because I know she hasn't used the other yarn yet. And again, it was just half an ounce, which is what, 15 grams, 15, 16 grams, something like that. It's so pretty, and it will be worth her having this little bit extra in case she needs it. This is Southdown. I think it might be baby Southdown. I won a 4-ounce ball of roving when I went to a retreat when I was a brand new spinner, and I would use it every so often for practice. And then finally, at some point, I think last year, I found it in my closet, and I thought, I'm just going to spin this up. And I thought, oh, I really like this. So it's been sitting on the storage bobbin. There's not very much here, but it's probably enough to do a square for my breed study, because I don't believe I have any Southdown in my breed study. So I thought, well, that's perfect, because I just didn't, what am I going to do with this? I almost, when it was on the bobbin, there was so much of it on the bobbin that I was like, I can't just unwind this and throw it away. And they seemed like more work than just plying it. So that's what I did. So I do have something that I'll be able to use this for. This is the yarn that I ended up with for my sweater spin, and each one is a different amount, because I was just, spinning and until I thought I wanted to move things onto a storage bobbin. So they have, very different amounts. This one's like 2 1/4 ounces, which is 63.8 grams. This one is 3.7 ounces, 1.8 ounces, so they really vary. And the total yardage is about 950, and it's going to be less than that when I remeasure it. So this was the conundrum that I was having with this yarn is, it's not, I didn't think it would be enough for a sweater, and I was just, because I think it's probably like a DK weight. I just didn't know what I was going to do. Oh, and it's a 3-ply, because I like a rounder yarn as well. I do think I have a solution, which I will tell you about in a bit. This yarn still has some VM in it, and it keeps falling out every time. Every time I spin it, every time I rewind it, every time I apply it, wash it, whatever, more VM falls out. So eventually, as I'm knitting with it, I will get the rest of it out. But I'm really pleased with the resulting yarn. I think I'm going to be really happy with my solution that I tell you about later. This is the caracal. I think I showed this to you guys last time. This is the caracal that it's for my breed study. So I'll be knitting up a square with this. I hope it's enough. I mean, obviously I can knit some sort of a rectangle with it until I run out. And I still have some of the wool remaining too. So if I had to spin some more up, I could do that. And then these are the 3 skeins that I have done for Gail Wood's farm. I think these are probably sport weight-ish. And I did them in 2 ounces. I thought one of them is slightly more than 2 ounces. And again, I haven't measured what they are post-wash. So I did these 3 skeins, and these are 2 plies. And no VM in this. It's just amazing. Well, maybe just a tiny bit. And then this is the one where I'm trying to do it a little thicker. So this is just a sample, but just look how boingy it is. It's just so springy. It's so fun. I just love this fin. It's really, I really like spinning with it. So obviously I have access to an infinite amount. So I imagine over the years I'll be spinning with fin quite a bit. So as I was spinning my sweater yarn, I really questioned whether it was going to be enough yarn. And so all month long, I've been thinking about what could I knit or how could I knit a sweater from this. And, you know, worried that the quantity might be too limited for the kind of sweater I like. Now, the first thing that many people would say is, oh, you can knit a vest. I could knit a vest, but I would never wear it. So if I go through all the trouble of spinning yarn, I want to make something I'm going to wear. So I have a few sleeveless tops that I've knit over the years. Most of them are like linen, so they're summer tops. I have one wool vest that I knit. It was part of the level 2 of the Master Hand Knitting program. You had to make a vest, it had to have seams, and you had to pick up stitches for the armholes and the neck. They were focused on finishing techniques, and your vest had to have that. You couldn't have something that had like built-in garter stitch and knit in one piece and, you know, all that kind of thing. I love the vest. I think it looks good on me. I never wear it. The reason I never wear it is if it's cold enough that I need to add another layer, I need to add a full layer. Just the torso isn't enough. Apparently is enough for some people. They'll say, oh, you just need to keep your body core and then you'll be warm enough. No, my arms will still be cold. So I need a full sweater with sleeves. And I usually want a neck that is pretty close fitting. I don't have any hair to keep my neck warm. And I don't want something open because my neck will get cold, and which just means I have to be indoors wearing a scarf, and I don't necessarily want to do that. So vest isn't going to work for me. A short sleeve sweater isn't going to work for me for the same reasons. Like a lot of people wear short sleeve sweaters, and even their wool in the summertime, I can't do that. It just the way my body regulates temperature, I know what kinds of garments I can and do need and want to wear, and a short sleeve sweater, I don't even like 3/4 length sweaters. That just drives me crazy. I can't do a vest, I can't do short sleeve. That's just not negotiable. I was thinking, what am I going to do? Do I need to find another yarn to go with this? And I do have some leftover yarn from my first sweater spin. These are very different yarns. And like this one is just airier and looser. It's a wool alpaca merino blend. And this one, that's the blend. And this one is from a sheep that is a Shetland Border Leicester Finn cross of some sort. They're just very different, and it could be that they would work together. I think color-wise they could work together, but then I'd have to figure out what am I going to do, like how am I actually going to do that? And so that was going through my mind, but this has been going through my mind the entire month as I've been spinning this. A couple of weeks ago in my feed, there was this video, and it was called, Why is Ranunculus So Popular? And my first response was, yeah, why is it so popular? So if you're not familiar with ranunculus, I don't know who on the planet might not be, but you might not be. So put the picture on there. So this has been very popular for years. I looked up, it was released in 2017. People are still knitting this. People knit multiples of these. They love this. And I am not somebody who looks to find out what's popular and then wants to knit that too. That's not how I choose my knitting projects. I usually have in my head something that I want, and I either design it myself or I go to Ravelry. I never have the hot right now filter on, it's best for you. And I'm never looking at just what is showing up on the screen. I'm going onto the left side of the screen and I'm choosing my filters. I want a cardigan, I want to use worsted weight, I want to knit it bottom up, I want it to have cape, I add all of the things I want about this and then see what shows up. And sometimes I find a pattern I like, and sometimes I find something that like gives me an idea of something that I might design for myself. But I am never looking at what is new, what is current, what is popular. I just don't do that. 40 years of knitting, I know I like set-in sleeves, I know I like this, I know I like that, I prefer working with worsted weight, there are these things that I know that I prefer, And some of that is, what do I like to knit? And what do I like to wear? And so I'm thinking about the process and the product and how I'm going to feel when I'm knitting it as well as when I'm wearing it. When I first sort of had heard ranunculus enough times that I went and looked it up, I thought, that is not for me. There's like so many things about that sweater that don't appeal to me. That doesn't mean I don't think anybody should knit it. It just means that that wasn't something that appealed to me. And that was based on the photo, the primary photo that they used to market the sweater. And the amount of ease that is listed, they have it listed in centimeters, and I think it was something like 73 centimeters, which is like 30 inches. And I'm like, there's nothing on this planet I want to wear that has 30 inches of ease. And I didn't like the wide collar. I didn't like the really puffy sleeve. I'm just thinking about, as a person functioning in the world, wearing that garment, that would not work for me. It's a style choice, and other people might like that. I just haven't looked into it any further because I'm like, that is not for me. I don't like top down. I don't like circular yokes for the most part. I don't mind looking at them, but it isn't like a type of sweater that I want to knit. And I don't like oversized, and I don't like the big puffy sleeves. You know, like this is like, it has all of these elements that I would never search for. So I just, you know, never looked into it, but I would keep hearing it over and so when I saw this video show up that said, why is ranunculus so popular? I'm like, yeah, I want to know too. So I started watching the video, and this is a woman who has knit 5 or 6 of them, I think. And she explained the different yarns and the different gauges she's knit at and the versatility of it. And I thought, oh, well, that's really interesting. And, you know, one of the things about it is that it doesn't take a lot of yarn. So I thought that might actually work for this if I could figure out a way to knit it that actually created a result that I would want to wear, because I don't want to wear that big oversized thing. Now, there are a lot of pictures that don't show people wearing something with 70 centimeters of ease, but they still have way more ease than I would want. I wanted to really understand how it worked. And one of the things that she mentioned in the video was that the sweater starts with the same number of stitches no matter what size you're knitting. And then you have this choice of this wide neck or this narrow neck, even though you're starting with the same number of stitches, different cast on. I'm like, how is that gonna make things different? And that the yoke is knit exactly the same regardless of what size. It isn't until the yoke pattern is complete then you do additional like raglan increases to get the full width, and then you split for the sleeves and the body, and then you continue down. And so one of the other things that I noticed when I started looking at more pictures is that, yeah, the body is really oversized, but the sleeves are very close fitting. But even the smallest size was 8 inches bigger than I would want. I think it's 47 inches. And I'm thinking I want something 38, maybe up to 40, somewhere in there. But I really don't want anything bigger than that. The sleeves on the smallest size seem too tight for me. So I like maybe a 13 or 14 inch sleeve. And if 13 inch if I want something really close, but maybe 14 if it's, a little bit looser. I do like a close fitting sleeve, but I don't want it tight. So I want a little bit of ease. And I wasn't clear on really how deep that armhole would be. So I thought, well, this is interesting, and that people can use a different yarn weights. So if you're using big needles like you would use normally for bulky weight yarns, so in order to get 3.5 stitches per inch. But you're using any yarn weight with it, which means if you're using lace weight or fingering weight, it's going to be very open and gauzy. But if you're using a worsted weight yarn, it's going to be a more substantial knit. It's still going to be looser gauge than you would normally knit a worsted weight with. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I wonder how this is going to work out. Now, I can read through a pattern and get a pretty good sense, but I've only knit one top-down circular sweater. It was a baby cardigan. And I've knit most of the circular yoke sweaters I've knit have been cardigans, and I knit them in the late 80s, and they were Icelandic. So I haven't done any top-down circular yokes because it's not my preference. I was, trying to look at the stitch counts and understand what was going on and how big around this yoke would be and how much room there would be, when the increases were done. And sometimes I just have to knit things in order to understand them. So I had a couple of skeins of this yarn. This is the Brown Sheep Wool Company, which is a US company, Nature Spun, and it's the worsted weight. They have fingering sport. I don't know if they have a DK, and then they have this worsted. And it's an interesting yarn because it's somewhere between a worsted spun and a woolen spun. I think it might be semi-woolen. It's a very round yarn. It's 3-ply. It's very round. And it has more yards in 100 grams than you would expect for a worsted weight. It's like 240 some yards in 100 grams. And yet it's thicker, and I usually work it at a slightly bigger gauge than I knit something like a Cascade 220. I used this yarn when I did my 1890s sweater. I had 2 full skeins left over. I knew it wasn't enough to knit a full ranunculus, but I didn't want to knit a full ranunculus with this yarn anyway. I wanted to knit it past the armholes so that I could see how it actually fit and how much ease I had. And the other thing was I wanted to knit it with a slightly smaller needle so that I wouldn't get 3.5 stitches per inch. It turned out the needle I chose gave me 4 stitches per inch, which it always sounds like very close. 3.5 to 4, that's pretty close. It's only 2 stitches different over 4 centimeters or 4 inches or 10 centimeters. But when you have that many stitches, it makes a big difference. So by knitting at 4 stitches per inch, I could end up with something that was 41 inches around instead of 47. But because I was knitting to a smaller gauge, and these were already slim fitting arms, they were going to be tighter than I wanted. And so I decided to knit this top and then kind of see what was going on once the yoke was knit and what I wanted to do in order to divide things up. So what I ended up doing was, let's go to the overhead and I can explain to you what I did. So when I had completed the yoke, they have a little chart in the pattern that tells you how many stitches you currently have on the needles and where to put markers for them, like this. So at this point, on the size 1, there was supposed to be 70 stitches for the front and 70 for the back, and then 35 for each sleeve. And then you were supposed to be doing a series of increases. You put markers here, and then you do like raglan increases. And you do them, for my size, or for the smallest size, 4 times. So you were going to be, 4 over here and 4 over there. So you'd have 8 additional stitches in each place. And so then I could see what that total number was going to be after all of those increases were. So at the end of that, then that would be 43 stitches there and 78 stitches front and back, 43 stitches here. Well, then you're splitting, and then you're casting on for the body, and you're casting on 6 stitches at the underarm for the body. And later on, when you come back to do the sleeves along that 6 stitches that are cast on, its pattern's calling for picking up 8 stitches. So I was looking at all of these numbers and I was figuring out, well, what's that going to be? What circumference is that actually going to be? And is that going to fit me the way I want? And no, it wasn't. But what I realized was that I could compare what it was going to be with what I would actually want. So what I wanted was a body that was somewhere that was 38 to 40 inches in circumference by the time things had been split off and I had my cast on stitches. And for the sleeves, I would want something that was 13 to 14 inches in circumference. So if I add up both sleeves and the body, that means I want something that is 64 to 68 inches altogether once I have all of those numbers. And what I realized was that what I could do was just take an inch on each side here. I could move those markers, 4 stitches in on each side and give my sleeves an extra 8 inches, and then I could even it out so that I could have the size one, I could have all of the stitches that I needed. I would just place these markers a little further in on the body to make the sleeves a little bit bigger, and then I could end up with something that I wanted. So I ended up doing a spreadsheet, and I looked at each size and a range of gauges, and then the stitch counts, and then what that would be, like what size would I have to knit at what gauge in order to hit the 64 to 68 inches. And so I have a few choices that way. Depending on how loose what yarn I'm choosing and how loose I want the gauge relative to that yarn, and then what size would I have to knit and all that, because like I said, I don't want a fingering weight cheesecloth thing, and I don't want something that is enormous around me. So I wanted to be able to figure out that sweet spot. Oh, I wanted to mention they have this wide neck and narrow neck, and I knit the narrower neck, and I couldn't understand why these are different. They're just different cast on methods, but it's the same number of stitches and the same amount of ribbing, and I couldn't figure it out. So I started out with it was a tubular cast on that then goes into a twisted ribbing. And I'm not a fan of what that looks like. So I wanted to try out the other cast on method, but also wanted to try out a tubular cast on that was twisted instead of looking like a regular one. So this is the twisted version. So this would be what it would look like upside down. So it doesn't splay out in the same way that the other one does, but I don't know that it'll stretch as much, but I also don't know if I need it to stretch as much, if I want something that's closer fitting. So the other cast on method they have in there is called a double twist, and they had some video links. I actually watched a couple of videos and I thought, oh, this seems like overly complicated. What is going on? And so I looked in one of my knitting reference books and I thought there was another way of doing this. I find a lot easier and I can get more consistent results. So I think what it is that this is just a much stretchier cast on, and when you're working at a loose gauge, the fabric is going to stretch anyway. So if you're working at a loose gauge and you have this cast on, no, just the weight of the sweater is going to pull things, wider. But so it's that particular cast on that's so stretchy. I do think it's a really interesting cast on that, how stretchy this is. This could be good for cuff down socks. People are always looking for a stretchier cast on, and this one I think is objectively stretchier than other cast on methods. But I didn't want to just try this. I also wanted to try to see how stretchy it was if I knit with a needle that was sort of more appropriate for this yarn weight. Like if I was going to knit a regular worsted weight sweater with needles for worsted weight yarn, how stretchy would that be? And it's still really stretchy. And then I looked at it, well, if you're going to use it with fingering weight yarn, like so many people do, that really gauzy thing, like how stretchy would that be, just because the gauge of the knit stitches are already really stretchy. So so this was an interesting experiment, and I think I probably will do some sort of video about this particular cast on and the stretchiness of it and compare it to some other cast-ons in different situations, because I think that's interesting. But I also surprised that I didn't have a video on a tubular twisted cast-on. Turns out I have one on doing a bind off for the tubular twisted knit, but I didn't have a cast on, so I might have to do a video on that as well. I also want to see how well this will pull over my head. It could be that she called for this because this is stretchier than this. I don't know. Or because she didn't know another way. The pattern is extremely well written and is really excellent, but that doesn't mean she knows every technique in the world. But there may have been a reason why she chose to do this. I don't know. So let's see what this looks like on me. So this is what it looks like on my body. I'm pretty happy with it. You know, I've got this barber cord in here that's making it a little ruffly, but I am happy with, you know, knowing where the underarm hits and then being able to know how long I want to make the sleeve. The pattern, because it's assuming I'm going to do this super oversized business, it's only calling for knitting the sleeve for 7 inches, or, you know, you can knit it longer if you want. And there's no shaping in the sleeve, so it's just meant to be the same size all the way down. So it starts out more fitted, but then it's going to be bigger relative to your arm down here, and then you do like an I-cord bind off or something to help make it puffy. Or you can just make it like basically not knit anything, just do a finish at the end, at the edge, to have a short sleeve, neither of which I want. But I really did need to know where it was going to hit me at the underarm, because I couldn't understand, like 7 inches is not, it's not going to work for me. Like normally I have a 17 inches from my underarm to my wrist is what I want the sleeve to be. And that turns out to be the case here. So, and I also want to have a more tapered sleeve, one that just fits me like I'm used to. So these are all changes that I can make without having to knit the rest of it. I don't have enough of this yarn to knit the rest of it, and that's fine. But I have a sense of this is going to work. And so now I'm more confident about the yardage requirements and how this is going to look on me, what I need to do to modify the sweater in order for it to fit me. So one thing that I might do, because knitting the entire body in stockinette is going to drive me crazy, is I might take some of these stitch patterns that are on the yoke and maybe put them around the bottom as well. I don't know if I want to do anything on the sleeve, but at least on the body. The stockinette sleeves don't bother me so much, but they just seem to go pretty quick. Stockinette body, it's not going to be fun. That's my plan for my hand spun yarn that I spun for Tour de Fleece. Let me know if you have any questions about those modifications, or what you have done to modify ranunculus to get a result that you like better. I'm sure some of you have knit the oversized thing and really liked it. Some of you may have knit that really oversized thing and not liked it. So let me know what you have liked or disliked about the fit if you knit it as the pattern states, or what you have done to modify things, whether it's been gauge, moving those underarm markers over to change the sleeve proportions. Tell me what you have done. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.